Hello, everybody. I'm Dr. Thunder, and this is Case Closed, the highest level conversation on the most relevant topics in this space. And we've got a great topic for you today. Will truth and black male excellence rise in the new media? Will truth and black male excellence rise in the new media? Do me a favor, like the video, like, share, comment, subscribe, become a channel member, where you'll get access to all archived videos, support black male media, support independent media, super chats enabled, super thanks for the replay gang, Cash App, Venmo, PayPal, Dr. Thunder Music, all one word, spell out the word doctor. And if you'd like to feed me sandwiches, then you can hit the Cash App, Sandwich Gang. But will truth and black male excellence rise in the new media? Below, so I'm reading my notes here. So immigration. Texas and Biden administration clash over border control. Governor Greg Abbott for not allowing the Biden administration entry to remove razor wire in popular corridor for migrants illegally entering the U.S. And was Trump correct about the southern border and the need to regulate and control it? Why do you think the Democrats want to allow the unchecked flow of migrants? And of course, we've got the old versus new media and influence. Massive layoffs continue in old media institutions, LA Times, Vox, and etc., as the old controllers of the narrative give way to a new media landscape. Are black men taking advantage and owning pieces of the new media? Will black men be able to change their image and take control of how they are portrayed in the new media? What are the factors contributing to the death of the old sense-making organs? And what can we learn from their demise? World Economic Forum has become a laughingstock and is losing its ability to hold sway and control the narrative. Jamie Dimon, J.P. Morgan CEO and president of Argentina, state that President Trump was correct about many things. How do black men politically align and adjust to the continued rise in populism? These things and more we will discuss on Case Closed. Will truth and black male excellence rise in the new media? Let's go. Warning: some viewers may find the following video disturbing. Viewer discretion is advised. Please like the video, like, share, comment, subscribe, become a channel member where you'll get access to all archived videos. Support Black Male Media, support independent media, super chats enabled, super thanks for the replay gang. Cash App, Venmo, PayPal, Dr. Thunder Music, all one word. Spell out the word doctor. And if you'd like to feed me sandwiches, please hit the Cash App. Sandwich Gang. Sandwich Gang. Thanks for being here on Sunday. It is January 28th. And yeah, football is actually happening right now. So we appreciate you taking the time to come through and check out our panel show, our case closed panel show with an all-star panel. And without further ado, again, will truth and black male excellence rise in the new media? Take it away.
Yo, ladies and gentlemen, welcome. How's everyone doing on the panel? Shout out to Kaizo, shout out to LAR. How's it going?
Great.
Doing
Excellent.
all right. It looks like Kaizo's not actually there, but he's probably dusting off his internet there.
All right. Now, it's been quite cold in Texas. Well, I know they went through a cold spell. Texas is huge, I know, Mr. LAR. Did your part experience that? Because, throughout the summer you were complaining about the heat. How did you get that cold thing?
Yeah, the roads froze and all that other stuff. But it's the South, man. People can't drive. Bunch of wrecks.
I see. All right, ladies and gentlemen, let's start with the immigration aspect of things, okay? So if you are able to look at a chart that measures encounters at the border. So it's not a question of how many migrants are coming in, it's a question of the encounters, right? So there's typically more than you encounter, but that particular chart has gone up like a hockey stick. If you look at it prior to 2020 and then more or less after 21, it has gone up like a hockey stick. It just so happens to correlate with the Biden administration. And some would say it's because of the message, right? If you put out the message out there that, hey, the borders are open, people are going to say, hey, let's come through, right? People are going to chance the journey. Now, there is a dispute whereby Texas, one of the border states, shout out to Texas and LAR, has put razor wire, right? Razor wire in a popular corridor that illegal migrants use to enter the United States. And the Biden administration says, hey, no, you got to remove the razor wire. Now, the actual technicalities of what they said is, well, we need access to that land as being the United States government. And if we wanted to go do something there, then, the razor wire will stop us. And Texas is like, yeah.
That's called a helicopter.
Yeah, it's like, nah, that's crazy. You just don't want us to control. What do you mean this razor wire? Like, you can't put razor wire on our stuff. So the governor, Greg Abbott, said, no, we're not going to take it off. And Donald Trump, in a speech that was focused on the border, Trump said that the governor should be given full support in the measure to deter migrants, right? So that's kind of a little bit of the backdrop. But let's start with this simple question. Why do you think, LAR, that this administration and Democrats at large, and I'm not even putting any judgment on this, it just seems to be the case that they don't want to control that border, even though the idea of a border is nothing crazy, right? It's one of these common sense things. Like, everybody has a door and a lock. Every company knows that, okay, if I want people, I have to check them, I have to vet them, I have to say, well, I want 2 laborers and 1 engineer. I just don't open the door, right? Anybody just come in and sit on the desk, let's see what happens, right? That's a strange hiring policy. Okay, well, why does it seem like they just want this thing to just kind of flow freely? Now, maybe I'll give you 2 choices, and typically things are combined, right? But A is, you have liberal elite whom feel like they don't deserve what they have, right? The soft-hearted people, right? We know we don't deserve what we have. We have a little bit of white guilt. Let's just let's show how good we are by messing things up, right? The consequences be damned because it's about feelings. Let's open up the border because after all, you have the oppressor and the oppressed. You see brown people, they must be oppressed. We must do stupid things because, we're guilty. That's one aspect. The other aspect is, look, man, there's a higher chance that you're going to get at least 70, 80% of these people voting Democrat, right? And if we want to, it sounds conspiratorial, great replacement theory, whatever, right? But it is a fact that, hey, these people coming in are going to help you out in the next few election cycles. What do you think it is? Because it doesn't seem to make logical sense to just say, oh, we just want the border open without any reason at all. What are your thoughts?
I think this is just another event that shows America's been getting dumber and dumber for a long time, because it's completely ironic and hypocritical. On one end, Joe Biden was the vice president of Barack Obama, who deported more people than anybody. So he's on the complete opposite side of the spectrum now. And on the other end, I remember when, there was a time when the Republicans were talking crazy about the border, but for a different reason, because they have to get their cheap labor. They need their construction workers and their maids and the people that they can pull up from Home Depot to do the cheap labor that they don't want to pay people to do. So both of these sides, for me, are hilarious. Because even with the Texas border thing, talk to the farmers and the people that own construction companies. They're right at the border. They talking all that stuff, and they're like, well, get your illegal butt over here so I can pay you pennies on the dollar. And now they gonna fight for the country, which is a complete utter crock of BS. Now the other part about this is, and I just gotta say this, for one, Hispanics don't really vote for Democrats like that. They get stuff out of Democrats that want them, and then they go vote Republican. That's just been a historic thing with Hispanics. That's just been so to think that they're gonna turn and be on the side of Democrats, completely ridiculous. That's not gonna happen that way. History shows us otherwise. But interestingly enough, I find it ironic that nobody says something like, you notice that crime really goes up when we let immigrants in these cities? And you notice that the things we talk about drugs and cartels go up, and just in specific instances. Like,
Yeah, a lot of blue city mayors are complaining. Chicago is complaining, saying, "Hey, Biden, you need to chill out at the border." Go ahead.
yeah, but Chicago's always been a hub for the cartel. How did the cartel get from Mexico to Chicago?
Mhm.
But it's a criminal city. You know what I'm saying? That's a city known for its criminality. But I take it a step back. Doesn't Los Angeles have this problem? Doesn't Miami have this problem? Doesn't New York have this problem? What am I missing here? People don't talk about all the stuff going on in the Southwest, like Arizona and all that, in those spots where people are just snatching cars and shooting people up. That doesn't exist. People don't talk about what's going on in California outside of the major cities where, with the legalization of marijuana, how these farmers are getting just jacked up by people who are in the drug game. And the
Well, you're
police
a
can't do
racist,
nothing about
LAR,
it.
if you say these kinds of things. I mean, it's not like it's the first. I mean, whenever you bring up crime associated with the border, and if you remember when Trump first came out and talked about the R word, the grape,
Yeah,
he was like,
right.
"Well, somebody's doing the graping." Great line, by
No,
the
no,
way.
no. No, no. That's part of the hypocrisy of it, because if you're going to use American history, wasn't the U.S. government in bed with these cartels and crime families? Wasn't they part of helping the distribution of all these drugs? So it's funny how you're in it on one end and you're out on another end. You're in, I want all of these, these people need asylum and need to come to this country. For what exactly? Nobody ever just says the truth. Cheap labor.
There are YouTube videos on how to game the asylum system, right? And, basically, you have economic migrants, right? We understand what that means. People are looking for opportunity. most people in the world are looking for opportunity somewhere like United States, but you can come in and say you're seeking asylum by gaming it in a particular way. And just a little bit of a point on this here, and I'll let you land. Basically, if you cannot be outrightly admitted as an asylum person, what happens is they detain you, and you know what that means, right? They detain you into the country, right? They drop you in Chicago, give you a little thing, and say show up in court in 3 years. Yeah, sure, right? It's not going to show up. So that's kind of like the situation going on. But you finish your.
Well, I'm going to end by saying this. You can't have it both ways. And that's for the liberals and the conservatives, the Democrats and Republicans. You're going to have to pick a side. Because basically what both of them want is they want a propaganda show for the public and the underbelly of getting over on these immigrants.
Mm-hmm. So, and I'm going to get your thoughts here next, Kaizo. There are a couple of themes I want to just highlight that come out from what LAR said. A is we need labor aspect. And I started to talk about that when I talked about, well, if you want to hire people, you go to LinkedIn, you specify, you bring them in a particular way, and then you interview and such, right? To say I want certain type of labor and to just do it in a very disorganized, haphazard manner. Well, where do I need the labor? Do I actually need these people in Chicago, for example? Right? Is that where we need them? What kind of labor do I need? You hear people also talking about, high skilled labor. Oh, we need high skilled labor. It's like, dude, you don't just open up the border and just hope high skilled labor shows up, that kind of a thing, right? So there's a question of organization. There's nothing wrong with wanting particular kind of labor, particular type of people. You can go back to the days of, the Operation Wetback, whatever, Cesar Chavez type stuff. It was an organized process. Like, okay, if it's cheap labor you want, well, let's go ahead and bring a cheap labor. What's wrong with organizing? However, the theme is in recent times, or past few decades now, large scale organized things just don't happen. Like, let's say the Manhattan Project or going to the moon, that kind of thing. Or this particular immigration project I was talking about. It just doesn't, like, we're more in like a chaos mode where it's just like, just open it. We'll sort it out. We'll sort it out afterwards, right? So that is a key aspect of what LAR said there. And perhaps I'll leave it at that, and things might emerge as you go ahead and give your points, Kaizo. So why have this unregulated border, right? Whereby Trump's idea of building the wall made sense. They went and they sold the portions of the unbuilt wall for pennies on the dollar when Biden came in. And now we see this hockey stick kind of spike in border encounters. Everybody sees it as, look, you can't have a nation without, this borders, language, culture thing. And even if you want cheap labor, why not regulate it? Do you just want voters? Or are you just doing virtue signaling? I think virtue signaling is a huge part of it, in the sense that, no, you can't be doing stuff to brown people because, it makes us look bad, or it makes me feel bad, that kind of a thing. But what are your thoughts about the whole thing, including what LAR has said? Kaizo.
Okay, so I will, as an outsider, I want to make a certain points here, right? Okay, so first point is this: when you have an open border, obviously it does disincentivize certain, let's say, citizens from gaining a certain level of economic freedom. But here's the thing, though: is it benefiting the country at large? Right? Look, I know you guys think America is like any other country, but it's not. You have Eurodollars. You guys control the markets from a grand scale. So having a few Mexicans and Cameroonians and Ghanaians coming through Nicaragua, right, then through in South America into Mexico and then into America might not be the worst thing, right? For those people, if they're going to be able to fill in the market and the gaps and contribute to the economy from the large scale, because I think this is an issue of, are you focusing on macro economics of America as a nation, or are you focusing on microeconomics as a citizen or group, or let's say in this case Black Americans, and how that's going to affect you people, right, on the ground. So I think first of all you have to actually decide what is more important here. Now, of course, I think Black Americans should focus on themselves. So I want to let's explore that a little bit further from LAR and Dr. Thunder, especially get more comments on that aspect there. But I do think generally, when it comes to immigration, this is a liberal sort of capitalist thing whereby companies are able to leverage cheap labor. And if that's the case, it does benefit the American establishment. But how does that impact on, let's say, black entrepreneurs, businessmen, etc.? And I think that's where I want to kind of go deeper.
Okay. So shout out to everybody in the chat. As you're coming in, please go ahead and click that like button, share the stream, share it on Instagram, WhatsApp, Signal, all that good stuff. Leave a comment in the chat. Subscribe if you're not already subscribed. So, Dr. Thunder, there's the black interest aspect that Kaizo has kind of raised, right? He said, hey, on a macro level, yeah, maybe you can absorb a little bit of chaos. Maybe this particular freezer is cold enough that you can have one door open. It's not a big deal. It'll be fine, right? And then, but you're going to need to deal with certain local spots. You talk about earlier, I talked about crime. Let's say it's in Chicago. Let's say it's in certain border cities. Let's say it's particular communities with regards to labor and whatnot. On that end, I'll start with it, and then you can kind of continue and mention and take it wherever else you want to go, Dr. Thunder. But the lowest end of the spectrum, I don't really think affects directly, right? Directly, it doesn't really directly affect African Americans because you don't want to pick strawberries. You're not picking strawberries. That's not really what you're trying to. That's not the market you're trying to corner, anyways. And then there's certain other spots where after they become, let's say, legal or whatever, right? They're able to, let's say, corner the transportation market in the federal government transportation contracts or certain trade unions, right? Hispanics, that is, right? That may be more of an impact, to you. However, that's a bit downstream from the border a little bit. And it is something that if you wanted to pick up and, let's say, attack that and corner that market, you can, but it seems like we don't see a concerted effort to corner certain, like the trades, for example, right? It may be starting and maybe getting better, right? So I'm just putting some kind of spots here on landmarks, if you will. But what do you think are the black interests here? How does this particular immigration thing affect the black community? What should be the black Americans' stance? A, as an American from a macro point of view, as Kaizo said, and then B, from a community, specific community and its interest point of view. What are your thoughts?
Yeah. So, and Bo Johnson in the chat is making a comment. I'll start by reading his comments. He says, the group of people unskilled labor affect is Black American, particularly Black men. They will pick fruit if they pay the, I can't see that.
Prevailing wage.
If they pay the prevailing wage. So that's an interesting point that he's making. So maybe perhaps even at the lowest level, there is some impact to Black people, black men in particular. And I'd argue that as the skill gets higher, so stuff like mechanics, other blue collar work, that we know that stereotypically Mexicans are very good at. They're good at it because they'll work for cheap, and the quality of their work is good. Yeah, I think that is having some sort of impact on the Black community. I'm gonna say something. I'm gonna say something else too. This term "black" is a tricky term since we're talking politics here. We're talking Democrats. So the term "black," which if you trace that term in America, in the United States, Negro is the word that black descends from. You had all kinds of different terms. You had colored, right? But Negro, what's happening? Ronald Neal's in the chat. If you'd like to join the panel, let me know, and we'll shoot you a link. Actually, I think you already have the link. But if you're talking black, you're actually saying Negro, colored, right? Jesse Jackson came along and said we're going to change black to African American. All of that stuff is black. Historically, that's what the black term meant. But then there's been this sort of clever and crafty, ambiguous use of the term to include other melanated folks. So folks from the African diaspora. And I'm fine with caucusing with folks from the diaspora. I don't have an issue with that. There may be some things that would be in common as far as our interests. But with respect to particulars, the black men, the black community, Negroes, in this country have specific needs and different needs to, say, Jamaicans or Nigerians or Ghanaians, Americans, right? We're going to tend to have different needs, and the structure of our communities is vastly different. So you have some challenges there. But the reason that they do that is it's a numbers game. They want to be able to talk. They want to be able to talk to a larger community, but then they also want to be able to utilize the African American numbers, in the voting process. So, yeah. So anyhow, I think that needs to be said, and that's not to say that certain folks may not have similar issues to us, and that there may be value in caucusing with them, but it's important to understand that the populations are different. And so when we say, okay, how is this stuff going to affect black men? How are we, how is, these porous borders, how is it going to affect black men? We need to be specific about that, because you might be able to argue that it wouldn't have a particularly great effect on Nigerians, or it might not have particularly a big effect on the Somalis, Somali population, or it might not have a big effect on Jamaican Americans, but it may have a bigger impact on black Americans. So I just wanted to make that point, which seems to get lost. What is it? Tariq Nasheed, and his constant talk about tethers. And there's a reason for that term, and I know that sounds pejorative, and I think he means it pejorative, because what seems to happen is, we're all black, kumbaya, until something goes down, and then that's you, Dusty Ninjas over there. We're Nigerians, or we're, Jamaicans, or we're whatever it is. We don't subscribe to that. So anyhow.
Mm-hmm. So let me put something on the table here. Like, for example, with the labor aspect, both in the chat and in this conversation, we've been talking about, cheap labor regulation and stuff like that. Maybe it's being done in a particularly disorderly fashion right now, and it could be more organized. And let's say somebody comes and says, hey, no biggie, why don't you be the person that needs this labor, sir? Why don't you have this micro industry or something, or whatever it may be, that starts to hire this mechanics, sir? Like, you're an American citizen, you're a black American citizen. Hey, sure, get on the table, talk about immigration, but you should be aspiring to the level, or you should already be at, depending on how aggressive you want to be here with this. You should already be at the level where, hey, you're hiring these people, and you're saying, hey, I need two Jose's, or maybe dial it down. Maybe we need a little bit more of Maria, whatever the hell it may be, right? That kind of a thing. And this is where also perhaps the kind of thing that Dr. Thunder mentioned will come in, where, yeah, it might sound one way to a Nigerian, it'll sound a different way to an African American, right?
So let me say this real quick. See, there's an issue See, okay, there's a less of an issue with this if taxation wasn't involved. So if you had, so say for instance, if you had very low taxes, like super low taxes, and then you also had a porous border, sans the security issue, because there is a security issue there too. But if we just tabled the security issue, then it's kind of like I'm actually a free market. I'm a fan of the free market. So, but invariably, what happens is certain folks are able to exploit certain loopholes in a way that other folks are not able to. So it creates different rules, right? So that's a problem. But if you had a truly free market, I'm actually not opposed to paying people. First of all, getting rid of the minimum wage. I know this sounds crazy, but getting rid of the minimum wage and paying people what they themselves agree to get paid. One of the issues when there's a continued rise in the minimum wage is teenagers. Kids, they can't get jobs because the employers they're not gonna pay a teenager $20 an hour. They're gonna find somebody that's more seasoned, somebody that has more experience, and they're gonna pay them that. So it creates actually some significant issues. But my initial point is a lot of this stuff is not really an issue unless you have high taxes, which our taxes are high and are getting higher. So if you have high taxes, then you have to prioritize representing the people that you're taxing and making sure that they're getting what they're supposed to be. So that be getting. So citizens, right? And we know that black men pay more taxes than black women. But we also know that black women are getting a lot more benefit, in particular from the Democrats, than black men do. Right? And then you have this issue, of course, with the porous border, which sort of is adding insult to injury, and disproportionately the jobs that will be eliminated, that will be taken by these folks coming across the border, are going to be those of black men. Right? The sort of labor and labor related kind of jobs. So, yeah.
Mm-hmm. So, LAR, I'm going to give you a chance to kind of respond here in this particular place that Kaizo has taken us, and then we'll see what Kaizo has to say about what your comments are. Nice comments in the chat as well. Someone said, well, the Renaissance Rogue says, border may be loose, but labor regulations are not commensurably porous. Yes, there's a mismatch again. Speaking of the organization of this, like there's nothing wrong with wanting cheap labor, but if you're a particular corporation that wants some kind of labor, you just don't open the door and say anybody come in and try out the job. There is a number of people question the skill level of those people, the locality where they are desired, and such and such and such. It's not a simple matter at all. So to simply just say, hey, I'm just going to open it and blah, blah, blah. So with regards to the African-American aspect, more particularly LAR, and any other thing that you may be thinking about, right? I want to get your reaction. But President Trump says, when I'm president, right? He was rallying recently in some major, mainly Hispanic Latino neighborhood in Las Vegas. And he says, when I'm president, instead of trying to send Texas a restraining order, I will send them reinforcement. He's going to reinforce that razor wire, sharper, stronger, titanium blades for that ass, he says, right? But shout out to LAR. What are your thoughts about this aspect of, okay, well, hey, why don't you get in the labor game? Why don't you get in the agricultural game? Why aren't you not the one saying, why aren't you hiring Jose, blah, 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 or whatnot? What are your thoughts?
So Trump is going to put it on the wall that was built, right?
Go ahead.
it's just like at the plant that he owns in Mexico. Like it's just
Right.
the interesting thing about this is like when they were talking about the labor part. We talked about it before how, you know, black men in particular were like have really flooded the trades. Black men are really in trades more than than pretty much everybody else. So the thing about immigration and illegal immigration, you're basically undercutting black tradesmen who are licensed to get paid a certain amount, who are certified to get paid a certain amount. So what people do is instead of paying the actual tradesmen, they pay legal immigrants. It's not just cheap labor, and I implore some of y'all. You know, I'm sure this goes on in every state and major city in America. Um, Go look up the guys the men and women who do inspections, whether they be for homes, businesses, or whatever. Look at all of the mistakes being made in even the most affluent subdivisions about how these homes are being built. And guess what? Who's really at fault now? You get what I'm saying? People have issues with certain builders, people have issues with certain companies, but they really can't say anything because they hired some people who are probably illegal or pay them low wages because um, paying people poorly or paying cheap labor does not mean it's going to be good labor. It's just cheap labor. You're going to get cheap results from paying cheap labor. You're going to get unskilled results for paying unskilled labor. Like, I don't know if y'all know the story of the building that it was a hotel. I think it was a Hard Rock Cafe that tilted over in New Orleans a few years ago. And the issue was they had a bunch of unskilled labor or quote unquote illegals doing the actual construction, and they were telling them like, "Yo, you're messing up. You're not. Hey, this is not this. You're cutting corners. This is not good. We can tell by the way this structure is going up. It ain't gonna go well." And the company itself was like, "What are you talking about? The buildings go up all the time." And the legals, they was there too. They were working. Hey, we working. Blah blah blah. It tilted over and people died. So when you think about that, and then they got sued, but then it's like, I'm sure some politicians got paid off along the way, and it ain't as bad as it should be. And I say that even using New Orleans as a particular thing because I know for a fact in New Orleans that's how they were undercutting the tradesmen in New Orleans. So people don't want to deal with the issues, even using the mechanic thing. They have mechanics. And this is the funny thing about America. If you go to a mechanic now, let's just go by stereotypes. You're not gonna want to go to your actual where you bought the car lot that you bought it from because it's gonna be overpriced, and they're really gonna use the cheapest parts. So something that could cost you $250 to fix is gonna cost you $2,500 to fix. But then if you go to I hate the term, but I hate to use it this way. But if you go to the Mexicans at the little junkyard kind of thing, oh, they're gonna fix your car, but what you're not gonna say is you're gonna have to go back to them 3-4 times to actually fix your car. And who's missing in the middle was the black mechanics that actually do the doggone job. So just because you're paying half of what you would at the car dealership, you keep paying you because you went 3-4 times to the Hispanic guy that people are cool with. And by the way, y'all ever figured out why sometimes y'all get y'all cars fixed and y'all people come to your houses to check out your car, and then subsequently months later something gets stolen or your car gets stolen from your car or in your neighborhood? Y'all never correlate those two things. But this is part of the issue. You can't have it both ways. And truth be told, that's really on the American business model for always trying to gouge their customers. Because I can say if I bought a BMW, you know what I would do? If something broke on that car, I would go to the BMW dealership to buy the parts. That's it. I just want the parts. I don't, or I get them from Amazon, or I get them from, if I have to go to a BMW dealership, I would just go get the parts. Because I already know, and this is a true story in this sense. I had to fix a water pump, a thermostat on a BMW. You got to take the water pump off. They charge you for flushing the fluids. They charge you $150 to flush the fluids. You know how you flush the fluids? It's automatic in the BMW. You hit the brakes, you turn on the heat, and you press a button. When people find that out, I got charged this for this, I got charged this for this, I got charged this for this, I got charged $1,000 to put in a light bulb that took 20 minutes to put in. No, this is not good. So now you're not, people are not thinking about the long-term effects of you're either going to get overpriced or you're going to get under-delivered. And what you're missing is just regular old do the job right. And that's the America we live in now. And I land my plan by saying this, and that's why Trump is going to put razor blades on a wall that he never built.
Shout out to you. And Trump, by the way, did say in this rally that Hispanic and Black families are hurt the most from the arrival of migrants into the country. He said, I'll get it solved and start the process. On day one, we'll start that process, he said. Right. But so I don't know if close us out on this topic, Mr. Kaizo. You brought up the aspect of macro level, micro level, community wise, Black people focusing on themselves, and then we went around here talking about what are the ways in which the Black community is actually affected, and so on. But go ahead and land us here on this topic, and then we'll move on to something adjacent. Go ahead, Kaizo.
Yeah, so I think it makes sense. I've heard from Dr. Thunder as well as LAR movement. So if I want to learn this point from this aspect is how can Black men though leverage this market, right? Let's say the liberals continue allowing people coming through certain borders. How can Black men basically go and register certain companies, have enough people from representatives or business partners from certain communities so that they then make sure that they're benefiting from the creation of these companies and the labor market, so exponentially growing their ability to actually exploit the nature of this business? Because I think that's part of the issue. Yes, Black men will suffer a little bit as the labor is kind of saturated. However, Black men can also benefit from ownership of businesses, and one way is by sort of infiltrating certain communities, because that's what every other communities do, right? We've seen a trend of communities coming to Black communities and setting up shop. So how can Black men basically do the same in this aspect to counteract what's happening? And in terms of macroeconomics, I think this is where politics matters, especially Black men, since we are supposed to be the leaders. We have to find a way to basically lobby for what we're looking for. In this case specifically is reduce immigration, stricter rules of engagement, and also kind of look at the taxes, because at the end of the day, like, I think American government looks at the overall taxes, how much money they're getting from these illegals, and they're kind of thinking, okay, it's helping us remain afloat, but that is also reducing the living standards of certain communities. So I think that's where I'll sort of leave it at.
Mm-hmm. All right. Okay, so now let's talk about narratives and narrative control. So generally speaking, you're talking about media and you're talking about academia. You're talking about certain places whereby if they state something, there seems to be more gravitas associated with it. And it doesn't even matter that it's only a few people that will look at what was said at the New York Times, right? But if it's said in the New York Times, at least, in the recent past, it had more weight, right? We're talking about a change in this particular landscape, a change into a new media type of situation. Now, change is always constant. We're not talking about anything particularly catastrophic. Change is always happening, okay? And one example of this type of change is the globalist, kind of multinational corporation type communism, right? Kind of expressed by the World Economic Forum, and we already talked about it in the sense that it's these types of people also that like open borders and such, and basically are about capital over labor. That's like their motto. If we were to give them a motto, capital over labor, and if it means open borders and communism, then that it is what it is, right? Now, Davos is becoming a joke. You may check on YouTube and you'll find certain videos. I think there was a priest that was invited, a Native American priestess, to do some kind of crazy incantation or something, incantation. But if that's a super chat, Dr. Thunder, I'll let you go ahead and address that
No,
here
it's
in the
not.
in the middle. Okay, it's not.
No, it's not a super chat, but it's just a BMI 3000 Reloaded, um, uh, friend of the channel, of course, saying the Mexican cartel wants unfettered immigration. Colombian cartels almost destroyed South Florida during the 1980s. It was unpoliced immigration. I grew up in the South, in South Florida. I saw it firsthand.
Yeah, and this brings to mind again this particular type of elite, right? We're talking about this Davos elite, or in this, taken into the United States, you have a certain type of liberal elite. No pejorative again, but they live in penthouses and they say things like open borders, but it doesn't really affect them. They have a penthouse with a doorman and security and such and such and such. They get into a vehicle, it's probably armored, and then they fly to the next elite location where they keep on talking about things that don't affect them. But it makes them feel good to say, hey, we're not oppressing brown people at the border, right? So
Okay.
this type of thing, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I just want to underline this one thing. And LAR mentioned this earlier, but I want to say it a different way. So the reason, the primary reason why this hasn't been solved, this porous border situation hasn't been solved, is because parties in both major parties, people in both major parties, elites in both major parties, they benefit from the porous border. So that's obviously the answer. Okay. Now they'll try to tell you it's logistics and blah blah blah, and it's a humanitarian, crisis, and they'll say all kinds of stuff like this. But really, that's the reason. It's because folks in both parties, especially the sort of main line down the middle, each party, they benefit from porous borders. The Democrats, they benefit uh, because I think they believe that disproportionately they're going to get votes. So there's a benefit. There's a vote benefit. They believe, and so that's why they won't shut it down. And the Republicans, it's the cheap labor, right? So, and of course, Democrats are also benefiting from cheap labor. Okay, so everybody's getting cheap labor. The Democrats also believe that they're going to get some votes. And perhaps the reason that the Republicans don't fight a lot harder against this porous border, it's a lot of theatrics in front of the camera. But but behind the scenes, when they could actually get stuff done, is because of something that LAR mentioned before, is that there actually may be more Mexicans, more Hispanics actually voting Republican. So if they're voting illegally, they may actually be voting. Many of them may actually be voting Republican. So that sort of opens up another window there. But what was the other thing I was going to say? And I think it's interesting, this whole business, how it's totally okay for the left to pander and to, even if it's just for the camera, even if it's just empty symbolism, to pander for the supposed black vote, right? It's totally okay for them to do that. But when Trump says stuff like, if he's going to do it or not, but when he makes direct statements saying, hey, you know, uh, black folks and Hispanic folks that are here legally, or whatever, you're being targeted by these bogus policies, blah, blah, blah. We're going to fix this on day one, like this. When he says that, then it's like there's like some kind of huge issue. I mean, y'all do know that you're doing the same thing, right? I'm just saying. I just think that's it's kind of funny. I don't know that if the dude's going to do anything anyway, or if anybody. I doubt that anybody's going to do anything about this problem because of what I said before. Right. But
There you go.
anyhow.
Yeah. 2 quick points about what you said. Number one is the numbers, as in immigrants come in, who are they going to vote for, right? Beyond the fact that yes, the Hispanics have good reasons to want to vote for Republicans. It's not just a Democrat thing. They have good reasons to want to vote for Republicans. There's also the aspect of jurisdictions and electoral colleges and the way things are set up, whether it's a senatorial districts or the president, right? It's not about just the raw numbers. It's about where they're going and what are they going to offset, which particular balance is going to offset in a particular jurisdiction. And then there's the other issue, which generally speaking, especially on the level of national politics, presidential politics, there's the question of keeping an issue alive, right? Don't solve the problem because this is the thing with which we play political football, right? Such as you can't play political football anymore, for example, with abortion, right? Because it's gone. But for years, it was a thing, right? Roe v. Wade, right? I mean Roe v. Wade on a national level, right? Roe v. Wade, Roe v. Wade, you use it to ginger up the people, galvanize, pull them out. And then at some point, they put that particular issue to rest. But in the middle, while it's in play, there's a lot of interest on both sides not to put it to rest. Because whether I'm a Republican or a Democrat, I'll raise it up again in the next 4 years. Hey, immigration. And then we do our dance. Anyways, so
I mean, it's the same thing with it's the same thing with the gun stuff, right?
Yeah.
We could have solved this issue with security in schools, these mass pew pew, scenarios. That stuff could have been solved easily, very quickly. In schools, you basically look. As a matter of fact, I would be willing to pay an additional tax for this, where the federal government uniformly outfits each educational facility. Okay, you got one entrance, of course, multiple exits. You've got a few people that have been trained with concealed weapons, and you have a metal detector and a security guard at the front door. You outfit every school with that same thing. That ends that issue. Almost overnight, that's now done because these crazies ain't gonna the reason that they do it is because it's a soft target. It's because there's no risk to them. But this would fix that issue. But instead of actually doing that, you keep the issue, you keep it going and you keep it going. And look, in a country where there's like 400 million guns, it's not realistic to even talk about buyback programs or any of these goofy things that they try to talk about. It's never going to happen. There's too many guns. So this is the only actual solution for a country like our country. So and it's like, why aren't you guys? The reason that they're not assertive about it is because they can use whatever happens as political theater to gain power, to mobilize and create momentum behind issues that they're pushing at the time. So anyhow.
100%. And just one last point on that. Typically, the Supreme Court is a mechanism for removing or putting issues or leaving issues in the political arena. Sometimes if there's a particular, let's say the conservatives control the political arena, the Supreme Court, but they still leave a particular issue at play that they could decide on and remove, then typically it's because they want it to remain at play. But not to get too conspiratorial there, Mr. Jamie Dimon, right? We all know Jamie Dimon. If you don't know him, you should know him. He's the CEO of JP Morgan. He's the most important money man out here in these Eurodollar streets, okay? He's not the richest man, but no, he controls that liquidity. Okay, you want to get liquid, you want, you got a company, you got this, you got that, and you need somewhere like $200-300 million flowing through your pipeline. He is the guy. He is the guy that makes other banks liquid, right? So
Mm.
Jamie Dimon, big kind of dude, CEO of JP Morgan, he goes to Davos, gives a particular interview where he says, "Hey, Donald Trump was right about a few things." He said, "Hey, didn't like the way Donald Trump said things, but that he was correct on a number of things, including the immigration thing, at least the rhetoric, at least what he said, right?" Because he's pushing back against the idea that the rhetoric was crazy. Like, oh, what do you mean border? What do you mean wall? What do you mean Hispanics, right? And the same thing was, I believe his name is Milei. He is the current president of Argentina. He's kind of like the new populist kind of, poster child right now. He said in Davos, right in front of them, that look, all the stuff you guys are preaching about this kind of international corporate communism is BS. It doesn't work. It ruined my country. Trump was right on certain things. Okay. This is an example of certain institutions that can control the narrative becoming a caricature of themselves, falling apart. This particular institution I'm talking about here is the World Economic Forum, the Davos people, right? They are a group of elites. They meet together. They kind of chart the course of what's supposed to be the agenda for government and the private sector with regards to solving certain problems, right? But now no one really takes them seriously. I was mentioning earlier that there was a recent, they invited this lady. She was some kind of a priestess to do some kind of a incantation of some kind of a thing, and it was ridiculous, right? Like it was the most ridiculous kind of thing you've ever seen. Like, why is this Native American chanting on this stage about all that nonsense that they kind of do. And if you're in Oregon, for example, they have that land acknowledgement thing. I don't know if they do it in Ohio State, Dr. Thunder, but where you acknowledge the land. Okay, they probably do. So those kinds of things are just becoming like a joke. People are not falling for this anymore. So they're losing ground with regards to their ability to control narrative. Now, same thing is going on with regards to the massive layoffs, which are continuing in the LA Times, the Vox, and so on and so on and so on. Okay. So black men have said in the past, look, we have an issue with the narrative, the way in which we're portrayed. Okay. And it makes sense because you say, well, you don't own hip hop. Why do you expect people to portray you and whatever? No, they're going to do whatever they want to do, right, with you because you don't own it. So now, given the fact that things are getting more decentralized, there's an opportunity now for new ownership to take place. What is the course that could be charted in that direction? And I want to kind of maybe Kaiser, I'm going to start with you on this, right? Basically saying, well, are black men taking advantage of owning pieces of the new media landscape, knowing fully well that it's not an overnight thing. If I were to give an example of, like, let's say some other part of the world, which let's take Nollywood, right? Nigeria, right? Nigeria's been spending decades just churning out movies, right? And it took decades for anyone to really pay attention. Same thing with the music industry, generally the entertainment industry, which they own. The point is, just because you own something doesn't mean that it's going to immediately be effective with regards to changing your narrative, right? You spend decades in the wilderness putting out movies or whatever. So the ownership process is not just a simple, oh, now, okay, cool, now we're just going to turn around and we're going to own it, and then we're going to just start putting our message out there, right? So it took years and decades, and then now Nigeria is still an s-hole, but it has a way better image because people are like, oh, Burner Boy or whatever, right? And they have 100% control of it. That's just like an example of ownership leading to control. Then you control your narrative, and that gives you soft power. That's what we're talking about, right? All that Burner Boy, Nollywood stuff is soft power. You can still be an asshole, but you need to own stuff first and then go through that line. Kaizo, can you put some landmarks on the table for us? There is a new media landscape. There is the issue of ownership and control of narrative. What can black men do? Where do we start? How do we open up this conversation? What are your thoughts?
Okay, so I want to start by saying what ownership isn't. And YouTube is not ownership. We've seen whatever's happened, whether you agree or disagree. Companies like YouTube can basically demonetize you and disincentivize you from operating on their platform. So that isn't really ownership, although certain attributes, for example, let me give you an example. Okay, Dr. Thunder and your channel, right? case closed. That is a multimedia network that is being created.
You fall off, they get you. Y'all don't own the internet over there in
That's the
Kenya.
white man. Yeah, the white man.
That's speaking of what ownership isn't, right? Shout out to
Right.
you. When you depend on the Chinese to but anyways,
Here,
uh
let me
let
read
me
this super chat. Let
go
me
ahead.
read the super chat. Thank you, Leon8 saying Byron Allen, America does not play nice. Okay.
Very nice. Interesting.
All right.
So let me go to you, LAR, before Kaizo makes his way back here. Okay. What do you think? Is there an actual opportunity? Maybe let's put it that way. Do you see this falling of the LA Times, falling of the New York Times, a certain kind of decentralization that's going on, whereby people are not just going to believe what the hell you say because you come from Davos or the New York Times or something like that? There's now more of an opportunity for maybe other people to emerge. Or do you see an opportunity for Black men to now be able to control more their narrative? And of which we understand that ownership is key, because you can put yourself out there, put your content out there, and then to just be taken advantage again by the small hats or something, right? So do you see an opportunity? Do you see new vistas opening up LAR?
Let me be petty first. Did you just say like Burner Boy? So y'all trying to tell me, is he Nigerian?
Yeah, yeah, Burna Boy is Nigerian.
So imitating the Akata is not changing your image? This is ridiculous. I'll be damned.
Go ahead.
Yeah, but here's the thing. I think people need to take into consideration, honestly, the fake belief in capitalism in the American dream. Because owning what? Let's just, in practical application, I'm going to put it to you this way. America owns a whole lot of stuff and is in debt. So what is ownership doing for you? America doesn't practice ownership. America practices ownership of people's labor, not actual ownership of things. So ownership doesn't get you money in America unless you own people's labor, i.e., slavery, all the way to sweatshops. To the illegal immigrants coming, they're owning people's labor. You get rich in this country by shortchanging somebody who's working for you. It ain't just the sale of your product. I need to make a product that's just cheap to make, sell it for a high price, and the people who are making it, I need to short them too, i.e., like a Walmart worker. You get what I'm saying? So is it gonna? I will say this about Black men and Black people in particular in America. We're probably in line to deal with the way America is going to be in the future better than everybody else. Because what everybody else needs to do is get deprogrammed from the America that had them entitled. So they're still having an issue with that. That's ultimately what you're seeing with all of this fake political stuff. And I'm gonna land my plane by saying this: Have anybody if you watch this country from afar for an extended amount of time, can you count how long idiots have been running the country? Because last time I checked, they make fun of Reagan for being old and losing his mind. They made fun of Bush because he was out of touch with society. Clinton was just supposed to be cool, even though what he did worked. They made fun of Bush Jr. because he was stupid the whole time. And they said his vice president was smarter than him. Not to mention going back to Dan Quayle being the dumbest vice president ever, as they would say. Then you fast forward, you get to Obama, who seems serviceable. Then you go to Trump, who for some, even though let's just say some of his policies did work, but obviously he's stupid by the things he does. You can tell he's stupid. Now to Joe Biden, who everybody could say he's old and stupid. So what does all of this stupidity add up to? And not to mention, the Congress is just as stupid. And we got old people in their 50s, 60s, and 70s that don't know how life works. So now our political system is just reality TV. Basically, the United States is the Real Housewives of stupid motherfuckers. That's it. Even if you own something in this country, you can't keep it. I.e., that's why all these businesses go abroad. What is the guy's name who they made the rule for that is in Argentina, if I'm not mistaken, that invested in Facebook? Because he took the money, he was like $12 billion, he renounced his citizenship, and then they made a rule that you can't leave without getting taxed. They didn't think of that beforehand. I'm done.
So LAR has so there's a couple of things. First of all, on this whole image thing, right? So if we take away the ownership part and forget that part for a second, see, African Americans made black cool, right? Let's say around the whole world, around the diaspora, it made black cool. For certain Africans out, but it still wasn't cool to be African, right? It still was ashy and fly in your eyes and all that kind of good stuff. So for certain other Africans in the diaspora, maybe in England or whatnot. So let me add the Jamaicans to that, by the way, to the African Americans, right? So the Jamaicans came in and they did their thing too. So it was like, oh yeah, black is cool, right? But still wasn't cool to be African. It's still over there in the Western Hemisphere. Then the Nigerians, especially through Nollywood and the entertainment industry, started making other Africans feel like, oh yeah, okay, so I guess it's cool to be African. One aspect of that. Another thing you bring up, LAR, is very important, which is that ownership is not everything. See, there's ownership, and then there's control, and then there's possession. It's like 3 buckets that people like to use when it comes to these types of things, right? So ownership, for example, could be, let's say, who owns Apple, right? Well, it's owned by shareholders, right? Who controls Apple? Well, then it'd be the board and such and such. And then there's a question of what they call possession. In other words, who are the actual people who operate it? Who has the keys and opens the doors and knows the phone number to Foxconn, right? And calls Foxconn and say, hey, Ching Wing, I need 16 million more Gorilla Glass, right? So simply owning is not the be all end all. That's a good point. And I'm just kind of creating here or mentioning this aspect that, look, there's always ownership, control, and then there's possession. And a way to kind of really see this kind of disaggregation of this kind of a thing is through publicly traded companies. You see, oh, the ownership is very different from the control, also very different from the possession, which tends to be with on the employee level. But before Kaizo comes back, Dr. Thunder, we're talking about ownership. Before we move down further into, well, what exactly happened with the old media? What can be learned about it from its demise and how not to repeat certain things, okay? Do you see an opportunity here to kind of own the pieces of the intellectual property such that you can then lead to narrative control, which then gives you that soft power, the ability to project the image in the way that you want it, with the understanding that ownership does not necessarily happen overnight. You're not just going to necessarily see the effects, and that's why I use the whole Nollywood example of decades in the wilderness and whatnot. Go ahead.
Yeah, I don't see that happening here. I just think that there's too much history of doing this a different way that has prioritized and propped up the dominant society. That's not to say that black folks can't do well and can't do a lot better than we're doing. and can't make significant strides in improving some of the sort of stereotypes, especially the stereotypes about black men. Of course, before that can really happen, our women are going to have to stop, uh, presenting all of this bogus information, about us. I don't, and
They
because
just need you to
frankly,
show that you can lead, Dr. Thunder. They need a man that can prove that he can lead,
right,
Dr. Thunder.
that's right, that's right. They'll act right. They'll act right if you were worth something, then I'd act right for you. That's right. Um, uh, yeah. So, but one of the issues here. So, and this is how this whole dynamic works, and this is why it's been so successful at keeping things sort of in the places that they're at. Racism primarily is weaponized against men, right? Because if the Vikings are on the shore, this is just an example. Vikings are on the shore, and they come in, and they're ready to take over, right? What do? They kill all the adult males. Then perhaps some of the infants can survive, or permitted to survive, and they take the women as concubines. This is just how that works. Okay? Now, in this scenario, whatever they're using, the primary objective is to neutralize the adult men because they're the biggest threat. Right? So if you have a structure set up a particular way and you want to maintain that structure, then you're going to do whatever you have to do to keep things in a sort of keep the dominant male in power, we'll say. And so that's why I don't think we're ever going to have a situation where males of subordinate societies are going to be given the same sort of by default advantages, and that first starts with image. So I think that there's always going to be a battle against the image of males from subordinate societies. So the only way to eliminate that would be to start your own society. And then you can be the one that is controlling copiously, controlling, your image. And perhaps you'll be the one that is oppressing others to maintain your power. I mean, there's a long history of this sort of behavior amongst human beings. It's not likely that we're going to be the, society that fixes this issue. I don't think this issue ever gets fixed. And like I said, there's just too much history and too much momentum and too much weight in a particular direction. Real quick, let me acknowledge a couple super chats. Well, one super chat here. Thank you very much. It was actually a super sticker by RL for $5. Thank you very much. No evidence that the super chat function is fully operational. So others, you can like, share, and support the show. Super chat is certainly a good way to support the show.
There you go. It seems like Kaizo is back from what I can see.
Yes.
So, Kaizo, you were in the middle of a few things have been said. I don't know if you heard, but you were in the middle of kind of breaking things down with regards to ownership. You talked about YouTube is not ownership. You talked about the multimedia conglomerate powerhouse, which is case closed. And then you cut off, right? But let's have you continue. What are the vistas that are open with regards to ownership, controlling the narrative, and the soft power that comes along with that with regards to black men in the new media? Go ahead.
Yeah. So as I was saying, right, something like YouTube is not ownership, but it actually allows for us to sort of gauge people, create an audience, and also network, as we're doing here on Case Closed, right? That's as you mentioned, multimedia conglomeration, right? So The next step would be for us to start working with Web3 and actually being early adopters of that technology, because what it allows is smart contracts. Smart contract would mean essentially any content created. This is not just about us as case closed, but generally when it comes to black men and media and ownership, is for us to be able to put a price at every video that's created, and that price, if that video is utilized in any other media platform. So, for example, Joe Rogan was able to sell most of the videos that he had on YouTube. It had to remove them because of the contracts that he made with Spotify et al. And he's able to kind of leverage that system in that manner. If you now have a smart contract way to distribute your networks and your content in general, when it comes to media, you can hard code it into the production of each content. There's a time scale. Everything is documented in a way that makes sense. The percentages, and that means also you can actually intelligently supersede each individual platform's own types and policies. Because you say, hey, listen, you want us? Okay, we've already got this smart contract over here. This is how it operates. You will have to allow us to put it on multimedia networks, right? Here's what it is. And that will prevent them from coming in with their hungry eyes like Cadillac Records, giving you very, lowbrow sort of compensations when you can actually own it. The next step also would be for us to actually own Web3 platforms, right? I'm talking about real blockchain platforms that would allow us to now obviously control the distribution network, just like Nollywood and these other aspects. Why do I say this? I'm going to use a certainly trending media personality, Jonathan Majors, right? Whether you think he's a good actor or not is irrelevant. All I know is he was in movies that I watched myself and actually enjoyed. One of them was one about some Black American witchcraft stuff and sorcery. I forgot the name of it, but pretty interesting stuff. If there is a multimedia network of Black men out there, and I say men specifically for a reason, right? He'll be able to just be able to find different movies, different things that he can come into. If Nollywood was actually, again, working with an American media platform distributor network, like, I'm not saying I say Tyler, was it Tyler, but if these things existed, people like that would be able to still add value to the global network. At the end of the day, new media allows for decentralization. You no longer have to get certain licenses from countries that cost a lot of money, right? Let's be clear. The reason why old media was and we were unable to enter old media was because of the price. You have to pay a business license to operate within the channels and the radio frequencies. That's really it. There's really nothing else. It is expensive, and it creates a high barrier of entry. New media allows us to actually have a low barrier of entry.
Okay, so low barrier of entry, and just to kind of not everyone is up on this particular term Web3, right? And then you mentioned blockchain, but just to kind of contextualize what you're talking about like right now, there's a frontier. People haven't crossed that frontier yet, but you can type into your YouTube right now, Web3 and intellectual property, AI and intellectual property. In other words, what are people now trying to do with regards to blockchain technology, which allows you to own stuff digitally, which allows you to create stuff which have some kind of permanence, right? To the degree to which there's permanence in the world. You can create permanence in the digital space, which was not the case before, because everything in the digital space could just be a copy of a copy of a copy of a copy of a copy. But now with blockchain, basically what it does, and that's the technology that controls Bitcoin. Bitcoin was the first blockchain, that kind of a thing. What it allows you to do is now you can create permanence in the digital space, and it helps with regards to being able to own things, collect royalties on things, and on and on and on and on. There are probably several courses in Ohio State University in the music department that maybe talk a little bit about this kind of thing.
Oh,
and
I,
aspect.
this is crazy. Like, I know I sound like a crazy person right now, but this is not just the future. This is it, right? This is the stuff that closes all the gaps. This took a copyright. All of that stuff is going to be hard coded. Even corruption is going to be utilizing Web3 and smart contracts, right? Because you don't have to trust anyone anymore. Everything is going to be on this Web3. Yeah, go ahead.
So 100%. So just kind of giving context for people who are not, don't have their heads up that particular place, right? But that basically you have blockchain, Web3, and this is going to greatly affect the ability to manage ownership, distribution of, of funds and whatnot. And this is, it's not some kind of, well, weird, how do I get in there? It's like, it's right now, this is the frontier. You can see who's talking about it, see what the proposed applications are, and all that stuff. Technology is a big part of why the previous order is crumbling. You mentioned the cost. Technology is notorious for changing cost structures, and that's what it did in this case. Whether it be now you're able to just go in your studio and do things as opposed to needing $1 million studio, and then now you can broadcast way more easily as opposed to having to pay for airwaves and such, right? So technology is part of the reason why the new order changed. And then there's this new frontier technology, Web3, blockchain stuff, whereby a lot of good things can happen. Let me ask you this. Let's start with Kaiser here. We'll go around about why. What do you think? Because now this is a little bit more like, let's say, political. In other words, other than the technology aspect, people say that the old media lied too much or something like that, right? I'm a little skeptical. Well, in other words, the I don't think that the quality of Walter Cronkite's lies, let's say, right, if we go back to more centralized lying machine, was particularly worse, right, than what you can get in whatever your trusted, you can listen. Let's say Glenn Lowry and John McWhorter are your thing, right? Um, it's not the case that, oh, these guys are just filled with so much more truth. Um, I'm just kind of throwing some skepticism in the water here as to, well, what exactly made these people now become a joke? People like the LA Times and New York Times and stuff. Is it the lies? Is it like the political pandering? Is it the fact that, hey, go woke and go broke? All that stuff, none of it is quite clear. Technology is a big aspect for sure. But from a political standpoint, can we point now and say, hey, look, things are going to get better politically in terms of information, in terms of information curation? People are going to be able to consume more truth and everything's going to be great and better. I'm more skeptical as to the great and better. I think it's just going to be a different type of delusions now, and you're going to be more able to choose where you're going to be deluded at. Go ahead, Kaizo, and then Dr. Thunder and LAR.
Yeah, I mean, I think you've answered it, right? It's the issue wasn't whether they were lying or not, right? Regardless, not any, but most platforms will have a certain narrative. In this platform, we don't necessarily have a liberal or conservative pandering. It is very neutral. Obviously, the so-called bias is on black men, right? And that's why we're focusing on. But when it comes to everything else, we are very neutral. So I think it's a lack of diversity that existed within the old media. So people could see from that, and then they can obviously dislike the very paternalistic sort of pushing of certain ideas and ignoring other ideas which were equally relevant. I mean, look, I don't want to sound like a liberal, but when it comes to diversification, right, before you start including certain minority groups, which are again significant minorities, meaning there is enough of them within the community that they could actually change the course of events. If you don't actually understand how they operate, you're losing out on a large market. So in a similar situation right now with the old media, they were so focused on specific show and tell events that I think our spirits basically started realizing that something is off. A very simple example, and this is a little bit very strange example, but there was a certain push against men in the old media TV networks, whereby they show the man in the family as some baboon, just bumbling baboon that doesn't know anything. The wife is always right. And that's just an example of certain narratives that can be pushed. And there's not diverse enough of those narratives that people realize, hey, I don't need to listen to this. I don't need to watch this. I can watch something else that exists in a different platform that actually show men as what they are, right? Men, etc. So yeah, I think you're right, and I would just like to add, diversity is key.
Okay, so diversity is key here. So, Dr. Thunder, the main thing here is, okay, oh, some people might say things are going to get better. given my particular kind of a worldview, I'm always skeptical as to like, oh, things are going to get better. There's such a thing as nature, right? There's such a thing as, just changing the particular cycle that you're just looking from a particular part of the kaleidoscope and, not really getting better. So Kaiser has brought in the aspect of, okay, diversification with regards to narratives, for example, like, hey, yeah, it's fine if you want to show men as idiots, but hey, maybe I need more choice. Maybe I need to see some other kind of thing. And then there's also diversification with regards to the sources of quote unquote truth, just facts, right? In today's environment, you can choose whose narrative you want to filter those facts for you, right? And then you can choose to go to Wikipedia or some other places, more decentralized kind of curators of facts to kind of sort that out, as opposed to, hey, here's the New York Times, here are the facts and the editorial upon the facts, just too centralized, right? And that perhaps was the problem. So, hey, Dr. Thunder, do you think things are getting better? More truth is going to emerge? Or what do you think exactly was the issue? Do you agree with Kaiser that it was mainly a question of decentralization and not necessarily a question of quality per se? Go ahead.
Yeah, human nature is such that we'll find a way to create a new level of corruption and whatever, something that's even worse than than the sort of exploitation of the current framework. When the framework improves, then the methodology, the approach rather, to corrupting and expressing our moral depravity, it'll find a way to evolve and become worse and stuff. And I know that sounds very pessimistic and thing, but it's actually not pessimistic. It's just realistic. Not to get too spiritual or anything or preachy, but the Bible says, "For all have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God." It's not something that changes because we become more enlightened. It's just a fact of our existence. We are sinful. We are selfish. There's a lot of issues with human beings. That's why in the Christian framework, we need a savior. And then even after your savior, you still got to work out your salvation with fear and trembling. So it's a struggle, even for people that are quote unquote good people. There's a tendency to do things that are wrong and bad. And certainly because we are locked within our own perspective, it is very hard for us to, it's impossible for us to not be biased. We are going to be biased. Okay. We're going to have a pet doctrine. We're going to have a dog in the fight. We're going to have a bias. And that's just how human beings are. Now, the benefit of a structure that creates more opportunities for other platforms and diversified platforms and everything is that you get more choices, you get more options, and so you can go to something that's more like what you like. And good, bad, or indifferent, under the old sort of the way that things operated, when there weren't very many options, you at least had an idea of the quality of that stuff. With more options necessarily means that the quality control is likely not going to be the same. So you're going to have likely even more misinformation, even more, versions in opportunities for depravity. And so I don't see that as improving. Now, what I will say is, and I wouldn't say that our platform is like case closed, is what I'd call neutral. I don't think we're actually neutral. We do have a bias, and we do tend to focus on the issues of black men and boys. So we do bias, and we are all, we've got two black men, we've got two that get called black on the panel today, but we present in the Americas, we would present as being African American. Okay, so we're going to have likely similar experiences with stereotyping and what our image is and what people think, about us even before we say the first sentence. And so we have a particular perspective, and we lean towards whatever that perspective is. I don't see anything wrong with that. I prefer when people tell me what their bias is. And that's my approach. I say, look, I'm leaning towards black men and boys. So then everything that you hear me say, then it almost creates a level of comfort for the listener. Because when I start talking about, the white man and stuff like that, then you'll understand. Then you'll understand why I'm doing that, right? Anyhow, that was a little tongue in cheek, but yeah.
Indeed. So diversity, whereby you state your particular bias, your particular angle, is what the market seems to be gravitating towards, right?
Yep.
And you just express a preference for that, and that preference particularly makes sense because overall there is no perspectiveless perspective. I think
right.
Nietzsche once said, tongue in cheek, that even God's perspective is a perspective. But anyways, so shout out to you, Mr. LAR. So the fact is, the market, right? The market is rejecting this stuff. In other words, these people are going broke. There's layoffs, right? So it's like a fact. We can see that the market is like, nah, LA Times, nah, I'm not buying it, such and such and such. What is your view on this? Do you, as a consumer of media, or a participant in the media landscape as well, are you happy with this new approach? What do you think was wrong with the old approach? Do you think there's opportunities for things getting better? Like, what is your interpretation of this, LAR?
First of all, my apologies. I got a family message, so sorry about that. The thing about the media is it's been dying for the last 20-something years, because I remember when the paper started going out of business. I got an older cousin that was an editor and been an editor, so it's not just for one, people forget that technology actually got rid of the papers, because the paper was on your phone now. It didn't even have to be at your house. So that's where that actually started. The news issue became more of an issue with cameras and cell phones and smartphones, and being able to actually stream and go live at the moment. So you had less opportunity to spin something. The issue becomes it's not necessarily, we thought that social media was a free fall, was like the Wild Wild West, but it wasn't. Because as you said, ownership is one thing, but control is another. People have control of the algorithm. So there's still only certain things that you're going to see. Now, your algorithm is supposed to be tailored to what you're looking for, but really it tailors what advertisements you're going to get. So now at this particular point, we're looking at a vast majority of false opportunity, in the sense of, if shadow banning is a thing, but also people going viral just for the most ridiculous thing is a thing. But more importantly, when it comes to actual good, useful information, the American society does not look for that. We as individuals aren't looking for the thing that can actually put us a step ahead in the world. We're looking for the most salacious thing or the most entertaining thing to the point where social media ruined the education, because kids can be on their phone in school and they know more about what's on Instagram than they do what's going on in their particular class at that time. So it's not making society smarter, it's making it dumber. So using YouTube as a reference, society has become like white America has always had an issue with this. They've always got in the way of evolution, and they've always tried to monetize the evolution because they were closest to the monetary mechanism. With that, they've always been out of touch with people, with the society. So at this point, what's going to be more in touch with society is an algorithm that somebody created that actually tailors to their ideology. And the issue is we don't know who that is. We're assuming it's some white folks. So nobody owns the future, but people do own and control the gateways and mechanisms that the future will use. And those people don't care about if society gets better. They just care about if they can monetize it, better or worse.
There you go. So, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to start landing the plane. This was a particularly succinct, concise, and tight conversation, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for those super chats. There's still opportunity to drop some more super chats, super stickers, super thanks for the replay, gang, right? Now, we've talked about things that have to do with controlling the narrative, and controlling the narrative gives you soft power, and soft power is good. Soft power gives you influence. You know, it helps, it lubricates things, it opens up doors. It definitely doesn't make things worse, right? We've said, hey, look, ownership will be key here. You're going to need to own something. But then LAR kind of broke things down a little bit more with that ownership area, said, look, there's a little bit more to control than simply, quote unquote, what you call owning. And in there, I talked about ownership, control, and possession, and why that's a complex that you can look into when it comes to how to influence something. As a shareholder of Apple, you own it, but you don't really have much control now, do you? Right? Neither do you have the possession of Apple that the employee has. And the controller, for example, let's say the board of directors, also doesn't have the kind of power that a possessor, that employee has. Middle management, for example, has a lot of power. Well, okay, because they possess, they own the keys, they have the passwords, they can mess things up, right, for you, that kind of a thing. So ownership, control of the narrative, changing the narrative to suit yourself so that you get more of the soft power in this new media landscape, because the old media landscape is crumbling, as evidenced by the loss of money, the layoffs in old media institutions, the loss of of influence of what some people call the blue cathedral, the old cathedral, the sense-making organs such as Davos and such, right? Those things are kind of getting watered down. Diversification seems to be the answer, but let's not be fooled into thinking that this is going to give us a purer truth. It's just going to give us a choice as to seeing what people's angles are, and then we just, people are going to gravitate towards the lowest common denominator and be trashy as they always are. We just now have to figure out a new way to be trashy. Isn't that right, Dr. Thunder? So we're going to land the plane by giving our final thoughts on these issues, okay? And we also talked about immigration, by the way, and the way in which it affects the African American community, the Black community, Black men specifically, right? Why the open border situation? What is wrong with a regulated border? How does this affect Black men? So go ahead, Kaizo, give us your final thoughts, and then LAR, and then Dr. Thunder can close us out.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of ownership, I think what will happen in the borders will happen in the borders. There might be more stricter rules that will benefit the average black man. However, regardless of the political scenario, what black men need to do is focus on ownership of companies and working together, infiltrating certain communities in order to leverage the labor market towards them. I think that is what is going to actually change a lot for the black community in terms of immigration. Um, of course, you can also lobby certain government um, states, and depending where you are and what you want, of course, that happens too. However, the next level, talking about um, ownership in regards to old media, new media, I think we're in the precipice of chance right now. Right, we know how the media works. Everyone here on the panel is, that's what we call a star panel, right? We're all media representatives. None of us are necessarily trained in media, as far as I know. Yet we are doing far more than people that have so-called degrees um, in media and presentation. So, if that's the case, let's leverage this stuff with the Web3 and decentralization and smart contracts. Start kind of looking into other systems and ways of distributing the content. If the content can reach a certain demographic, regardless of the platform, you will be able to leverage that. And I think, of course, when you add economics to that, that's when we start to raise and have ownership. Nollywood, for example, already has that market, right? It has users, it has a user base. The next step is now monetizing it. So I think that is the future for black men.
All right, all right, all right. LAR, your closing thoughts, sir.
I think the future is very interesting because the future has to be with black men not having faith in America and not helping people try to navigate their losing faith in America. This country and the system is going down and it can't recover. So the things that once worked, most of the things that once worked will not work in the future. And the other things that did work in the past are pretty much on a timetable. So, they always said the only constant in life is change. And if you're not willing to adapt, evolve, then you're going to get left behind. And I think the quicker that you accept that this country, people are not equipped to adapt, and if you try to help people adapt, they're going to drag you down, then you'll actually make it. There is no the American dream has been murdered by red tape. So at the end of the day, you have to learn how to navigate in a world without red tape. And that red tape helped a lot of people. And now it's the same red tape that's choking the life out of you. So that's just my thoughts on it.
Very well put. Very well put. Navigate in the space without red tape. That's where you're going to need to learn how to navigate. Otherwise, you're going to be choked by the red tape. Shout out to Web3 reference that Kaizo made. Now, Dr. Thunder, you go ahead. Got the floor. You got the mic. Closing thoughts and take us out.
Yeah, everybody, thanks for being here. Thanks for the supporters. Like, share, comment, subscribe, become a channel member, all that good stuff. And, make sure you come back 8:30 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, Monday through Friday for Rolling Thunder. So please come through for that. And Wednesday evening for Getting Ish Done. And that's the longest running productivity level up programming in this space. And so please come, and that'll either be on Ike's channel or my channel. That's a 9:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time show, sometimes as late as 10. And then Two Dads React. That's a Thursday at 10:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So for a full assortment of shows, make sure that you're subscribed and bang that bell. So, anyhow, this has been a good topic. Will truth and black male excellence rise in the new media? Well, the short answer to that question is no. The short answer is no. Unless the new media is not here. I think as far as gaining more of a foothold or hold or power in this society, I don't know that the society is designed for that. It is designed for a particular group to dominate, which they have. It's their society. We're just, we're just passing through. If we want to be able to dominate in that fashion, then we have to create our own society. To the extent that a rise in new media produces content that incentivizes us to go and get our own and to create our own society where we create the rules and then therefore are not we are not haunted by the specter of old policy that never has really gone away, but has only been sort of modified by legal tweaks here and there, then I think that'll be in our best interest. So anyhow, thank you all for being here. And this is not to say, and I'm not a pessimist, I'm a realist. It's not to say that we can't do better than we've done now. And it's not to say that we can't use the new media as a way to cover some ground and to improve ourselves. But with respect to American society, I don't see a way where black men are ever going to get what I would call fair representation. That's not to say that individuals won't have opportunities to succeed, but as I said, the dominant society has designed this thing in a way for them to disproportionately benefit. I expect that is going to continue even with new media. And albeit pessimistic in its tone, get out there and be somebody. All right now. See y'all later.